Hello everybody and welcome to this Altmetric webinar, and today we're going to discuss Altmetric for early career researchers, in particular focusing on career progression and how to apply your new expertise using Altmetrics and Altmetric tools to help you with your career progression. So a little bit about me. My name's Natalia Majarovic. I run client operations here at Altmetric. Before I joined Altmetric, I was an academic librarian. So I worked with researchers in the field of open access, bibliometrics, altmetrics, research data management, and so on. So this is very much my area of interest. So thanks everyone for joining us. This is what we're going to cover during this webinar. So first of all, thinking about why you would want to use Altmetrics as an early career researcher, particularly the benefits and the kind of insights into your research that Altmetrics can offer. We'll talk through the tools that are available for researchers, how to establish your online profile. So you may have come across lots of different tools that have been recommended to you or that you're already using to set up an online profile to promote and disseminate your research broadly. So today I want to talk through some of those tips and some of those tools beyond Altmetrics. And also discuss open access, Kudos, Google Scholar, and also have time for any questions. So if you do have any questions throughout the webinar, please put them in the comments box and we'll pick up on them at the end. All right, so Altmetrics for early career researchers. First of all, let's start off with a definition of what Altmetrics are. I'm sure most of you will be familiar with Altmetrics now, having seen the badges on journal articles and across institutional repositories. But just to give you a little bit of kind of background, Altmetrics or alternative metrics came about around 5 or 6 years ago now, and originally kind of the definition was alternative or even article level metrics. So that would be alternative to traditional metrics such as citations and metrics such as the impact factor. So Altmetrics are focused on tracking online engagement with any type of research object. So not just focusing on journal articles, but any type of research that you produce and you want to understand how it's being discussed. And we track that discussion and that conversation across a broad range of different online sources. So here at Altmetric, we track 16 sources of mentions, and that varies from social media such as Twitter, Facebook, and so on, through to policy documents, Wikipedia, Dimensions, academic citations, and so on. So traditional metrics like citations are useful in helping you understand how your research has been received and potentially applied within academia. But one of the problems with traditional metrics is that they can be slow to accrue. So the field that I used to work in was economics, and economic citations can take 2 to 5 years to accrue. So that's quite a slow delay in helping you get any feedback on your journal article, for example. So one of the reasons that Altmetrics came about was to help provide more immediate feedback surrounding your research, to help then give you evidence, particularly as an early career researcher, on how your research has been received, and then this can potentially give you evidence to take back to potential employers or to include on your CV to demonstrate how your research is having an engagement or potential impact with the broader public. So what are the reasons and benefits of using Altmetrics as an early career researcher? So one of the first things that we hear a lot from researchers is that at the most basic level, it helps you find out who's talking about your research and what they're saying immediately. So as soon as your research is available online with a unique ID, wherever that might be, in an open repository, on the publisher website, in your institution's repository, you can track using Altmetric any discussions, so any mentions in the news, if someone tweets about it, if it's mentioned on Reddit, you will know straight away if you set up an alert about that discussion. So it helps you monitor and track real-time discussion. It also means in that way that you can make sure that your work is being accurately represented. So if you're following what's going on and what's being said around your research, then you can make sure that that is accurate. And if you want to respond or kind of just keep an eye on that discussion surrounding your work, then you can do that using Altmetric. And finally, you can also show broad engagement with your work that you can then use in your CV and job applications. And what could those examples be then? So here's some kind of things that researchers have pulled out of Altmetric data in the past to provide evidence of engagement with their research. So maybe through Altmetric you could find out that your work has been commented on by a thought leader in your field. So that could be on a blog or in a news story. It could be the subject of media attention in a specific geography. So maybe your research focuses on a particular area or country, then you would want to focus on understanding what the online media attention was in that particular area. You can do that using Altmetric. You may also find that your research has been referenced in public policy, which has been particularly popular with our institutional users who are interested in finding out, has our work had impact? And impact, I think, is a word that is used a lot at the moment, particularly here in the UK with the Research Excellence Framework and impact case studies. And I think impact surrounding research is a very interesting term, but one that should be used with caution, particularly in the context of Altmetrics. This is because although your work might get referenced in public policy, it's still important to then find out, well, how was that policy implemented? What was the impact of this public policy document? For you then to say, okay, this policy mention has resulted in proper impact. So that's a question just to ask yourself, is to follow the kind of the pathway to impact with any mention or discussion that you see of your research. Ask yourself the question, what change did this actually make in the real world? So did it potentially influence cultural discussion? So you could see that in news mentions, or did it generate discussion by influential bloggers in your particular sphere? So you can do all of this using Altmetric. You might also want to use our data to identify collaborators. So you can look in the mentions at researchers that might be talking about your work or talking about research in your particular field, and you may want to make connections with them so you could work with them in the future or just to follow their conversations. You can also identify career opportunities or monitor attention to research that is produced by your peers. So to find out, well, this is a really significant research paper in my discipline, I want to follow the conversations and discussions. It may lead to interesting collaborators that you could connect with to work with in the future. You may also want to use Altmetrics to build on your existing network, find out where the conversations are happening in your particular field, get involved with them so you can see through Twitter or Facebook that people are discussing your particular area and you want to get involved in that. And it may also just become a discovery platform. So if you find that there are news sources or blogs or Twitter accounts that frequently discuss research that you're interested in or your research, then you might want to start following those or subscribe to those sources so that you can keep up to date as a discovery service. Another really kind of important use of Altmetric is identifying and understanding when others have built on your research. So obviously if your research is freely available online, which I'll talk about a little bit more in a second, then that leads to an increased likelihood that others will use your research or your research data or any of your research outputs and apply that or build on it in new and interesting ways. So I've seen really nice examples of researchers that have shared their data, for example, online, and then through Altmetric and through the Twitter discussion that they can see using Altmetric, they can then see how their data set was built upon, visualizations that were created and shared on Twitter as a result of them sharing their data set. So it's really useful and important, I think, to follow the online discussion surrounding your research to find out, well, how have others built on it and what are the merits of me sharing my research and making it openly available. You may also see real kind of tangible ways that others have built on your research. For example, you can find out through Altmetric that it's been cited in a patent application. So we use IFI claims as a source of our patents data. and then you can see in the Altmetric mentions and patents when they're linked to your research. We also do include academic citations data through the Dimensions database. So alongside Altmetrics, you can also see traditional citations, which helps you kind of compare and contrast those two different types of data sets to see, well, what is the broader attention that I'm seeing to my research and what is the academic attention that you can see in the citations data. You might also want to look at how your research is referenced on Wikipedia. I think Wikipedia is a really valuable source for understanding how the broader public are how they understand your research, and maybe it would be referenced in Wikipedia articles that you had kind of no idea about, or that maybe they're an unusual way for kind of being linked to your research. So Wikipedia references, I think, are always an interesting mention in Altmetric. Something I mentioned at the beginning is that Altmetrics were designed to look beyond the journal article. I think this is something that's really important as an early career researcher. So you may have published your thesis and maybe a book or a journal article, but whatever stage you're at in your research and producing outputs, Altmetric is there to kind of help you get attention for all of your research, not just kind of the focus on journal articles that bibliometrics and citations really do focus on. So as long as these research outputs, such as data sets, books, theses and presentations and so on, as long as you make them available online with a unique identifier, such as a DOI, we can then track that attention around those outputs, and you'll be able to view the discussions through Altmetric. So a little bit about the tools that Altmetric provide for researchers. First of all, we have the Bookmarklet. So the Bookmarklet is our free app. You just download it and add it to your bookmark toolbar. And then whenever you view a journal article or a research output online, you just press the button on your Bookmarklet, and you'll be able to view all of the attention surrounding that research output. We also have the Altmetric badges that are free for researchers. So if you have a website or an online CV and you want to kind of promote and showcase the attention that your research has gained, then you can embed the Altmetric badges on your CV, and that kind of really brings your CV to life if you add the donuts alongside each publication that's listed there. We also provide access to researchers for the API. This is through our Researcher Data Access Program, the RDAP, and you can apply, if you're doing research specifically into Altmetrics, bibliometrics, scientometrics, you can apply to have access to our API. Okay, so that was a little bit about Altmetrics in general and the tools that you can access for us for free. If you're interested in where you can go and get access to the Altmetric tools, I'll include the link at the end. But if you're kind of clicking along right now during this webinar and you want to kind of get going, go to the Altmetric website, click on researchers on the front page, and all of the links to the Bookmarklet, the API information, and the badges will all be on that page on the website. So a little bit kind of broader now, focusing on ideas for establishing your online profile. Some of this comes from when I was working as a librarian and kind of helping researchers to establish kind of a real online profile for themselves in helping promote and disseminate their research. If you're at an institution and there's kind of a real demand and focus for you to kind of get out there and start sharing your research, I think there's you're very busy as a researcher, particularly as an early career researcher, maybe you're doing teaching as well. So I wanted to give you some tips on what are the first things that I would do as a researcher to set up my profile and share my research. So first of all, I would follow open principles as broadly as possible. So, when we talk about open access, open data, and so on, we really talk about ensuring that as many people have access to your research as possible. Sometimes you may need to follow publisher guidelines in terms of copyright, but if possible, if you're signing any agreements with researchers, with publishers, if you can, find a way to make your research open, whether that's through the publisher's open access agreements, or through your institution's repository, or by using free open repositories such as Figshare. I would really do that to then encourage kind of broad dissemination of your research. There are so many benefits, but first of all, taxpayers, members of the public who may have helped fund that research can then access the literature. You might have more chance of influencing policymakers. There has been research that has proven that open access research has high citation rates. And it also means that practitioners can apply your findings. If they can read your research, it's more likely that a doctor in a hospital will change the way they treat a patient, or the way that an engineer builds a bridge, as long as your research on that particular topic is out there available for people to read. So make your research as open as possible. Second, I'd set up a Google Scholar profile. You may have an online CV or other profiles, but Google Scholar profiles have really good search visibility, so I recommend getting your profile and your publications uploaded on there to help people access them and view them. ORCID. You may have already heard of ORCID and set up your ORCID ID. The ORCID is basically an ISBN for a researcher. So it gives you, as the researcher, a unique ID, and then you can go, so you can see an example here at Tim Berners-Lee's ORCID profile. And so he set up his employment, his institution, his qualifications, and then he has what we call claimed all of his outputs using the ORCID profile. Lots of publishers and funders and institutions have also built the ORCID ID into their existing processes. So you may have already seen when you're submitting a journal article, for example, that they request your ORCID. That is a positive thing for you as an early career researcher, because it means that there's no kind of disambiguation between the author. That might be particularly in like a database such as Dimensions or Scopus, where it's really important that if people search for your name, they find your publications associated with it. And this is also really useful for if you've got a name that other people have got, so you can then make sure that your research is attributed to your name and your unique ORCID. So get signed up for an ORCID today if you don't already have one. It's free on the website. Kudos, you may have heard of Kudos. Kudos is a company that we work with quite closely here at Altmetric, and they use some Altmetric data. But Kudos is a free service for researchers, so you can claim your publications very similar to the way that you do in ORCID. But then it gives you the opportunity to explain your research, maybe in a way that might maybe kind of more simpler than you would in the actual research. And then share it for free using Kudos, and then see how the discussion is generated as a result of claiming it, explaining it, and sharing it through Kudos. So have a look at the Kudos website. And then some engagement activities. So first of all, my number one tip is to share your research. So if you've made it open, you've got your ORCID, you've got it on Kudos, and you've explained it, number one thing is to share it. So that might be to tweet it, share it, comment on a blog that's relevant in your particular discipline, share it amongst your peers, just get it out there as much as you can amongst your online network. You might also want to contribute to a subject-specific blog, or if you have your own blog, set that up and help kind of get people engaged and interested in what you're writing about. And you may also want to contribute to a kind of an online source such as The Conversation. There are kind of similar ones maybe across disciplines, but The Conversation is you may have read it, but it's an online source that is edited by journalists, but the content is written by academics, whereby they may explain a particular subject that's going on in the news or related to your recent research that's been just published, to help other people, the broader public engage with that and have a better understanding of your particular discipline. So it's a great resource, and I would definitely check The Conversation out if you haven't already. So if this is all interesting to you and you want to learn more, particularly about open science and open principles, I would definitely encourage you to look up the Open Science MOOC that was set up by John Tennant, who they've got lots of modules online. Lots of it is kind of in progress at the moment, so it's very fresh. But they've got some amazing resources on there if you're interested in learning more about the benefits of being open and having reproducible research and so on. Excuse me. So thank you for listening. I hope this has offered a nice introduction to Altmetrics and how you can use Altmetric data as an early career researcher. Now is the time for questions, so please do put them in the chat box if you have them right now, and I will pick up on them. Okay, so we do have a question about unique identifiers. So how do you get a unique identifier for an output? Books have an ISBN, but how would I get a DOI? Or how would I get a DOI for a book? So the first thing I would suggest is to speak to your publisher. If you've published a book, for example, and it has an ISBN, but you would like to get a DOI, then they may be able to mint it for you. Altmetrics, Altmetric, the company, so we will also track books, and we do that using an ISBN. So we wouldn't necessarily need a DOI for us to track attention to a book. We can track it through an ISBN. But you do find more and more that when books are published, particularly as ebooks, then they will be assigned a DOI, so check with your publisher. There are other ways to get a DOI, so if you have other types of research outputs that I mentioned earlier, like presentations and software and posters and so on, you can mint a DOI yourself using the website Figshare. So that's an open, free repository. Just upload your research onto there, create a record, and you'll get a DOI for it if it hasn't already been assigned by the publisher. Thank you for your question. Are there any other questions? Okay, so I think that's it for questions. If any questions do pop up, please feel free to contact us, support@altmetric.com. We're more than happy to help. And that's that link that I mentioned earlier about how to find all those free resources that we provide here at Altmetric, altmetric.com/audience/researchers. Okay, thanks everyone.